Hi, I'm going to show you the 24-hour strategy now. So your bell work today is to make sure that that 24-hour strategy gets done for your Cornell notes. So yesterday, you should have done the note taking, then waited 10 minutes, did something else. It doesn't have to be exactly 10 minutes, but sometime that day, you come back and you do the note annotation, the 10-minute strategy. And so now we are going to learn about the 24-hour strategy. So the next day, the day after you take your notes, you're going to go back in and you are going to group and chunk. So right here it says chunk notes. And then you're going to write 1 to 2 questions for each note or each chunk of notes, each group. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at this together. All right. As I read through this, I'm going to go back. This is my second repetition. I have to read through it so that I know what goes together. How can my Cornell notes help me make better grades? And so I remember that yesterday, whenever I was taking notes, and then when I annotated the notes, I circled the important information and I grouped and chunked, or I didn't group and chunk, I highlighted things that showed the main idea. You might have underlined. And I put question marks by points of confusion and stars by possible test questions. I think that in order to group and chunk, I'm going to really focus in on the highlighting and what belongs together. So I highlighted up here because that's the main idea. So it seems to me that the main ideas that go together would go in one group or chunk. Okay, so I look here, this highlighting, this is about retention. This is about the amount I remember will increase every time I return to my notes. Down here, these are all about strategies. Then at the bottom of my page, I had evidence. So you know what? I think that I see 3 big chunks here. Okay, so I'm going to chunk off, and it doesn't have to be with a ruler. You could just chunk off this information with a straight edge of any kind. And I'm going to draw a line all the way across my notes there because this seems to all be about repetition and retention. And then down here, the speaker was kind of focusing in on the 10-minute, 24-hour, 7-day strategy and telling me how to do that. So I'm going to chunk all this together because seems to all be about repetition. How to do the repetition. Up here, it seems to be talking about the importance of repetition. Why to do repetition? Oh, so I'm thinking why here, and I'm thinking how here. I'm just making some notes to myself as I start to think about how to write good questions. And then whenever I look at the bottom, I see that this chunk is really about evidence. I could actually put in a fourth chunk here because this is a timeline. I'm going to go ahead and do that. You can group and chunk your notes based upon what makes sense to you. But for me, this seems to be about, this is a how question too, evidence. Okay. So as I look at these groups and chunks of information, I can see right off the bat, I made a note to myself, you know, how can Cornell notes help me make better grades? This seems to be pointing to, there's that 10-minute and there's that 24-hour and there's that 7-day strategy. So I'm going to say, why is repetition important? Oh, important. There's no U in that. For retention. And maybe you don't like that word. Maybe you want to use remembering. Because we know that repetition or retention means the amount I remember. Okay. So the question I'm going to ask myself here that I feel like could be answered over here. Why is repetition important for remembering? Well, because the more I go back to new information, the more it will increase my retention. So I could find an answer to that question here. It will help me remember. You know, this question may not make sense to you. You might write a different question. You might write a question like, why? Why should I go back to my notes several times? You can make the question make sense to you because these are your Cornell notes. But the key is to tie the question to the chunk of information. As we look here at this section, I'm thinking, okay, these were all about how. So how? What kind of strategies can I use to get repetition? So this is how can I use, oh my goodness, I want to put a U in everything. How can I use the 10-minute, 24-hour, and 7-day strategy for repetition? Okay. Sorry about that. And then, you know, I know that we said how, but I like this question. What evidence will my teacher be looking for in my Cornell notes? And I'm just going to abbreviate. Cornell notes with C notes. So, what evidence will my teacher be looking for in my C notes, right? So I should have done that in pencil, huh? Okay. Down here, what's the timeline basically? When do I do each strategy maybe? I don't feel like this is as important to me as looking up here because I already know the when up here. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at that timeline, but maybe you are. Maybe that's something that you really liked about this note set. And as I look closer at my notes, I want to make some things stick together. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do some more grouping and chunking, things that I want to pull out in this section. Like right here, I really want to just make these things stand apart so that I can find them easy. And as I look at that, man, that makes me think that, you know, I'm just going to really make sure that my 7 stands out here. This is the 7. And I'm going to make sure that I'm just doing some more color coding basically. I'm going to make sure that my 24 stands out here. And I'm going to make sure that my 10 minutes stands out here. 10, 24 doesn't stand out very good, does it? I'm going to 24, and this is my 7 strategy. So that's it. And you can see that the 10-minute strategy took you about 9 minutes. I think the video was that long. And you can see that the 24 strategy took us just a very quick, less than 10 minutes. And so that's how we're going to build in repetition, not spending hours at one sitting, but instead spacing out practice. I'm going to go back to my notes 10 minutes after I take them. Then I'm going to go back to my notes 24 hours after I take them. And then next week, I'm going to come in and I'm going to complete the summary. So that's what we'll do next week. All right, I hope this helps. Let me know if you have questions.